Originally, this was going to be a breakdown of several maps I found to be a problem in Pillar Chase 2, but the more I wrote about this one map in particular, the more frustrated I got and how much I realized I had even more to say than I thought. It's getting its own dedicated video now because I hate it that much. In the future, I might split everything into its own video or segment them in a lot more generalized way in their categories or whatever. I just find myself having a lot to say right now. You've read the title though, Oni's Mansion. Man, what a fumble, and you can tell by my name I'm an expert at those. Please subscribe. I'm honestly of the opinion that a good majority of the maps in this game are pretty poorly designed, and a lot of the reworks that have been happening with some of them haven't really been the best at all. And none of them really solve the main issues that these maps have, or the map design problem in this game in general. I personally think in terms of the overall worst maps, there's a lot people could say, and I would agree with their opinion. My personal one is just Oni's Mansion. Let's just jump into old Oni's Mansion, why the layout was a problem in the first place, and why it needed a rework. As much as I'm going to criticize the reworked version of this map, the original did have its flaws. I'm going to start by saying that this map got changed after I started being a YouTuber, so I don't have much footage to show of it at all, really. But I do have the maps made by the Fandom Wiki staff or people in the community that I can show throughout this video. That's where I got these maps from. The old Oni's Mansion was very weak for many of the chase-oriented monsters in this game, but strong for the zoning monsters, whether they use traps, puddles, or a button that wins the game for them, like Forest King. It was really tough for monsters that didn't have any form of map control, traps, or something like that. And even then, if your monster had bad stamina economy, it could be pretty bad too, like with Nilo. The only real risky area on the map, though, was Jail Cell, which had a key in it, so you did want to go inside of it. The other keys were all hidden all over the map, and they were tricky to find without a guide, so a lot of new players just weren't able to do the task on this map. Not to mention, there generally weren't any good opportunities for monsters to capitalize on people doing their tasks outside of the jail cell area. Anyways, that room outside the jail cell was incredible for objective camping, and it's extremely defensible for just about any monster in the game, regardless of their abilities. You were able to get a lot of mileage just sticking to that side of the map, killing survivors who drop down the hole or approach the jail cell in any way. The map was also insane for EXE, as he could place multiple traps in the choke point leading to the jail cell, and use his highlights to see if someone was going inside. There's also the stairs, which were perfect for any monster's traps. Outside of that, the main thing we need to know is that this map had 4 main strong loops. This was the second floor hold leading to the staircase, the 2 side rooms on the second floor, and a large rectangular loop on the left side of the map from the door. The whole loop forced monsters to approach from one angle, and whenever they got close to the survivors, they could either loop around the hole itself or drop down and loop back up the stairs. The 2 other loops on the second floor were pretty underrated, especially against a few particular monsters, but they weren't as easily abusable as the other 2 loops on the map. Which, speaking of, the rectangle was incredibly powerful against most monsters, or ones that simply didn't have any zoning or trapping capabilities. This single loop basically just shut down Whist, and it still probably would even with the current version of him. The last thing I want to highlight is that the room in front of the jail cell has 2 entryways, one through a destroyed wall passage, and the other through a regular door. This second passage was connected by the tatami room. The tatami room itself is pretty weak for survivors unless they utilize the passageway. Then it became a stronger piece of a loop, or it became a good hiding spot. This map absolutely did need to be changed for it to be a lot more fun for both sides, and somehow they just made it worse. I'd say the old map was mostly survivor-sided, with a few monsters being able to really turn it in their favor. The new Oni's Mansion is pretty much exclusively monster-sided, regardless of whichever monster you're playing. The layout has changed a lot to mirror the actual Oni's Mansion from the game. On one hand, cool. On the other hand, this is a terrible idea. I could have told you that using an accurate layout of a completely different style of game was a bad idea, but I digress. For starters, there's now 3 floors instead of 2. We'll talk about them in a second. Let me just talk about the defining traits of the map in general. Despite having 3 floors now, the map is overall much smaller and tighter with a lot less playable space. The map is also defined by its dead-end hallways and the death chamber rooms, with no real way out if the monster ever sees you in one. The hallways are tight and short, and there's a lot of choke points in high traffic areas. You don't need to do much else other than stand by the staircase on the second floor in the early game to get all your kills as a monster. The third floor only adds 3 small rooms, connected by one extremely thin hallway that connects to the staircase, meaning that if you're up here, a single trap is all it takes to deny you leaving it. These 3 rooms, while connected, sure, aren't really a strong loop. The core of it is extremely tight, and it's very easy for monsters to gain ground on you with how tight of a space it is. The distance you can really gain here from a monster is minimal, and they're always going to be close and be able to capitalize on the smallest of mistakes. Okay, so there's no reason to go on the 3rd floor outside of getting the 2 keys up there. How's the 2nd floor? It's arguably just as bad. See, the 3rd floor is clear about what it is. It's just up there for you to get the 2 keys and that's it. The second floor makes you believe it's an actually good area to be at, but it's really not. There's a total of 4 rooms on this floor, and 3 of these rooms are entirely dead ends with keys inside of them. This just means if the monster's anywhere near you, not even in the doorway exactly, just because of how small the map is, you're kinda just dead. The only room that has any sort of safety or defense with it is the piano room. The piano room is the first thing we're touching on here that looks like a proper loop, and unfortunately, it's a pretty weak one. Looping around the entire outside of the room can be good unless the monster just doesn't care and paths directly towards you thanks to the doors and the giant hole. It's very easy to put you into a corner where you don't know what to do, and if you sit there, they get all their stamina and cooldowns back. If you try and run, they have 2 options to cut you off. This isn't a loop I can really rely on against experienced monster players. It does work against some monsters, and I can do a little bit with it even against them, but I can't rely on it for a long time to help me survive. If you don't like that side, you could run along and loop around the doors, but that's not really that strong either, and it's kind of just a last-ditch effort or a way to mix things up as you're being chased. I do think the piano room is definitely useful. I think it's a way to retreat to a slightly defensible position on the second floor and then try and make your way to the first floor by using that loop. That's really where the only strong loop on this map is, I would say. Speaking of, to get to the first floor, you have to use the staircase. They're shut down by a single trap from any monster that has them, or really any sort of disruption ability. Custards, puddles, floating heads, notebooks, thorny traps, everything shuts down the staircase. In the chase, you want to stick to the side that has all the 2 smaller rooms on it and force the monster to approach you from behind. That way, you can run towards the staircase without them cutting you off. The staircase railing can be walked over by monsters, but survivors have to go all the way around. This means you'll have instances where you'll approach from a bad angle and the monster can just walk over the railing and then drop on top of you and kill you. So overall, the second floor is also a very weak area. Most of the rooms up here serve no other purpose other than to just be objective death chambers, and there's really only one semi-defensible area up there. So, how's the first floor then? Well, it's also really bad for Survivor, but compared to the rest of the map so far that we've talked about, it looks like the Garden of Eden. The kitchen is a really iconic part of Aoni's mansion to me, but too bad there's no real reason to ever go in there outside of the objective because it's also a dead-end room. The most you can maybe do is use it to hide against monsters with bad location abilities, but if they catch you in here, there's no reason you should survive against any monster. The room leading to the jail cell now only has one entrance, being the normal doorway, and the jail cell relatively is unchanged. On the old map, the jail cell itself was the dangerous part, but now it honestly feels like the room before it is the riskier option somehow. It takes so much time to actually get to the jail cell that very few monsters will ever actually spend that much time going all the way back there and looking for people, unless there's barely anyone left. The Tatami room no longer connects to the room leading into the jail cell, which, again, adds to the danger of that room. It's basically a really short and weak T-wall now. Not really worth trying to loop this thing unless you're desperate, which you shouldn't do because the library is 3 steps away. So, the library is sadistic in more ways than one. Firstly, half of it is also a dead end. Wow, I guess we just didn't have enough of those. Wow. The side of the library closer to the stairs is pretty much the strongest loop on the map. This spot is extremely abusable as long as you're using your ears and just always go the opposite way the monster is going. Some monsters can definitely deal with this area better, most notably any sort of monster with any hazards at all, only needing to use their ability once and then the entire loop is denied. Like every single loop on this map, all 2 of them. Oh yeah, it's also bad against Valem because he can shoot over the table. The monsters that struggle with this loop, you'll want to try and get them to chase you from the Tatami room side. From there, if you gain enough distance, you can go for a high-risk maneuver, either going up the stairs and hiding in there, hiding in the kitchen, or staying safe and continuing to loop them around the stairs in the library. That's it. That's all you really have. The last notable aspect of this map is that it has a ton of closets. Most of them are packed into the jail cell in the room preceding it, which I have no idea as to why that is, but there's also several scattered across the map, usually in dead ends. The safest ones are by the piano room, but like most lockers, they're terrible for actually hiding in them. You can and should use these, but only for the HP regeneration against monsters like Stricken, Inkfell, Nilo, all these people that can easily do tick damage to you. Just note that if you hear a monster coming, you should just probably get out and run anyways, because they can hear you in there. It's pretty obvious. So how do we fix this map? Well, I think the best thing to do is not base it so faithfully off the Aoni's Mansion from the actual game. Aoni is a completely different game with completely different chase mechanics. You shouldn't adapt it so faithfully, and you need to take liberties and make concessions to make it a fun map for your game. For example, there should probably be more than one way up and down between the floors. You should probably also have a generally wider hallway, more space, and a lot more ways to get in between the rooms of the mansions other than the very vulnerable hallways and the very obnoxious doors. You really need to cut down on how many dead ends there are, provide more passageways between rooms and floors. Just make it so survivors aren't fish in a barrel, basically. The map in its current state isn't fun for either side. Survivors have essentially no agency on their positioning or fate and will kind of just die to any good monster player unless they camp one specific loop. Monsters, on the other hand, really only need to sit on the second floor and kill the survivors that will have to walk by them, and then from there clean up the stragglers with little issue. There's no deeper engagement, strategy, game plans, or anything that monsters or survivors can employ on this map because it's just so suffocatingly small, narrow, linear, and the bigger issue, boring. Balance aside, the bigger issue is this map just isn't fun. I really do not know how this map got out of the testing phase because of just how unfun it is to play on both sides. I think this map just needs another rework sooner rather than later because every time I play this map at a PlayStation or Toilet Chase 2, it makes me want to go and play something else because I'm just not having fun. Map design isn't an exact science, but I think having more options for both monsters and survivors to play the map differently would be a pretty good start instead of the one rigid way this map has so incredibly monster-sided. I don't have really a lot to say for a conclusion, if I'm being honest. The most I can say is I think most maps in this game are actually pretty bad, and they're honestly one of my biggest issues with this game, and they're just so boring. And because they're so boring, despite how big of an issue they are, they're kind of just very low on my priority list for me. I can't tell you when the next map video is going to come out. I just think a lot of the reworks and the task reworks and all that stuff just haven't fixed any of the issues with the map design in this game. If you like this video, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe, all that stuff. It'll help motivate me to make the next one. And if you do like this sort of content, please check out my other videos. All right. See ya.